So what we're going to talk about is insulin and why it's such a big player in our overall software, if you will, what runs our body. So first of all, we want to talk about fasting insulin. And fasting insulin is something that our pancreas uses. Let me just make a little drawing here. Pancreas over here. Pancreas has to regulate our blood sugar levels. And let's just say, for example, that blood sugar wants, I'm going to oversimplify this, wants to be at 3. I know it's normally in the 65 to 85 range normally, but we're going to keep it at 3. And for breakfast, let's just say that we had a big old bowl of fruit. We had a banana and some oranges and orange juice or some cereal or whatever. So in comes quite a bit of glucose. Our pancreas wants to keep the 3, but all of a sudden there's more glucose in our system. So what happens, our pancreas says, all right, now I've got to downregulate those two guys out of the bloodstream. So what does it do? It sends in insulin coming from the pancreas. It's its messenger, and insulin hits the cell and basically tells the cell, hey, you know what? I know you really like burning fat, but you can't do it anymore because now we need to switch fuels and I need to pull those offending glucose out of the bloodstream and into the cell, thus balancing the blood sugars again. So now your blood sugar's back to 3, which your pancreas loves, but now those offending glucoses are down into your cell and those are burning instead of fat. Now, while this is going on, your cell is sitting there using all this glucose for fuel, and then eventually insulin clears. It's off the cell. And when that happens, it allows the door to be opened again for HGH. And human growth hormone comes in, especially at night when we're asleep. And it comes in and occupies the very same cell receptor site as insulin does. And when that happens, it triggers a reaction in your cell to basically recuperate and rest that cell overnight. So when your body's asleep, you're basically trying to turn back the hands of time using HGH. That's the great part about this HGH we love. And it's also burning most of your body fat. So you burn most of your body fat at night when you're asleep. And I'll go into that discussion here a little bit later when we talk about HSL and why all this happens. But the fat is supposed to burn at night. And that's a normal metabolic process. So, and I'll use my own case. Mr. 355. Back in 2008, and I was insulin resistant, and we'll talk about this here for a second. In my metabolic process, Mr. 355, I would eat things that I was told to eat that are healthy. So let's call what I was eating brown rice, whole wheat bread, Greek yogurt, oatmeal, fruit, all these different forms of healthy foods were basically just putting more glucose into my system. What's wrong with oatmeal? Well, oatmeal is a starch, and what happens is starches in your bloodstream, they turn to glucose. So now I've got all this glucose that my body's having to deal with, and I know a lot of you guys out there are still, thinking you're eating healthy when you're eating fruit because that's what the nutritionist or the doctor told you to eat, just to be healthy. Even some diabetic diets tell us to eat fruit when that's one of the worst things you could be eating. So all that glucose is coming in, your pancreas struggling to maintain a consistent 3. Remember, it wants to keep 3. So it's now having to park insulin on your cell 24/7. And as it does that, sooner or later what happens is this cell stops responding. It just becomes numb to that insulin. It's there all the time. Instead of being on and off, it's sitting there. And so as that happens, we're not pulling this glucose down like it normally would. So then your pancreas says, hey, I see that your blood sugar levels are starting to creep up a little bit. I need to send in more of my friends to make this happen. Now it's kind of ganged up on your cell and it says, hey cell, you need to pull this glucose down, otherwise we go hyperglycemic and we die. So when that happens, all that glucose finally starts coming into the cell, thus taking it out of your bloodstream. The doctor pulls your blood work and guess what? Hey, your glucose is back to 3. Great news, great blood work. But 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Here's the problem. With all that insulin sitting on my cells, it takes a long time for it to clear. And with HGH showing up at its appointed time at night when we're asleep, and it sees all that insulin sitting there on the cell, it basically rejects it. So off goes your HGH, can't use it, which also means all that fat I was going to burn, I don't. All that rest and recuperation, that restoration I was going to have, I don't. That means I was insulin resistant or pre-diabetic. And this is something that's crucial because if this is happening, guys, there's no way that your body can actually burn fat. Chemically, you may burn a little bit, but man, it just gets messed up and it just won't happen. And I felt like every morning I wake up and a truck hit me. I just felt tired old, because I wasn't getting this restorative effect of the HGH happenings for me. So this is one of the reasons that here at Prolean Wellness we focus so much on the blood work, and in fasting insulin is one component of that, and it's different than a regular fasting glucose or an A1C. All those are important, but insulin is the driver. Glucose is the resultant. So this is really what we want to see, because it's controlling your cell's desire to either burn fat or store it. Burn glucose or basically not need to and burn fat. So, and this can quickly turn into diabetes type 2, because what can happen is if I have all this insulin sitting on your cell, and let's say this glucose is used up because insulin's still pulling down that glucose at a regular rate, then I run out of fuel. And so what happens was we crash, okay? Our energy levels go down, we crash, and now my body says I need fuel. You still can't get at the fat because insulin's sitting there. Fat would be the logical choice, but you can't get to it. So now what happens is you get a craving because, what does insulin want to burn? Glucose. So the craving happens, and this starts this whole process over. You load more glucose in the bloodstream, guess what? More insulin, and we just start on this cycle down. It's a vicious cycle. So this is one of the reasons why we focus on the blood work, because if we have this going on, we're going to have a real tough time losing weight. Plus, the great part about this is, you guys don't give up. We can take an insulin resistance or a prediabetes back up to a normal metabolic or a normal insulin sensitive state, usually in about 5 to 6 weeks, without use of metformin or other forms of drugs that basically do that, or attempt to do that, I should say. So we prefer to do it the natural way, but this makes a huge difference in the way our bodies burn fat or store it.